For years, my life felt like one long uphill climb. I worked late nights, took every extra shift I could, sacrificed weekends and sleep just to build something that looked like a stable future. And eventually, it seemed like it was finally paying off. I had a steady job, a small but comfortable apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and a wife I truly believed loved me with her whole heart. Emily and I had been married for 4 years. Our life wasn't perfect, but it felt real. We joked with each other. We made plans. Sometimes we talked about buying a house and starting a family someday. Most of all, I trusted her completely. But everything began to collapse on an ordinary Tuesday evening, because that was the night I accidentally saw a message on my wife's phone, and the person who sent it wasn't a stranger. It was my best friend, Jason. The same guy I had known for nearly 15 years. The same guy who stood beside me as my best man when Emily and I got married. The same guy I trusted like a brother. At first, I convinced myself it had to be nothing. Emily was in the shower. I was in the kitchen cooking dinner. Her phone was sitting on the counter next to me when it suddenly buzzed. Normally, I would never even think about touching her phone. We had always respected each other's privacy, but then it buzzed again. And my eyes moved toward the screen without thinking. A message preview appeared. Can't stop thinking about last night. My stomach twisted instantly. I stared at the screen, trying to find some kind of innocent explanation. Maybe they were planning a surprise for me. Maybe Jason had sent something strange as a joke. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Then another message appeared. Did he notice anything? My heart started pounding. Something felt very wrong. I knew I shouldn't do it. I knew it was crossing a boundary, but before I could stop myself, my hands had already picked up the phone. Emily had never hidden her passcode from me. Honestly, I wish she had, because the moment I unlocked the screen, my entire world started breaking apart. The messages weren't new. They went back weeks, actually months. Flirty conversations, late-night messages, plans to meet when I was working overtime. Pictures. And then I saw the message that made my chest feel like it was collapsing. I hate lying to him, but I can't stop seeing you. It felt like someone had driven a knife straight into my stomach. For a second, my vision blurred. The shower was still running just a few steps away in the bathroom. Emily was right there, but suddenly it felt like she was miles away from me, like I was living with a stranger. Still, I kept scrolling. Part of me wanted to stop. Part of me desperately hoped I would find something that proved I was misunderstanding everything, but instead, the truth only got worse. There were photos of them together. One picture made my hands start shaking. Jason and Emily sitting close together in what looked like a hotel room. She was leaning against him, both of them smiling, happy. The timestamp showed it had been taken 3 days earlier. 3 days. Just 3 days before that, the three of us had dinner together. We laughed. We drank wine. Jason even joked about how lucky I was to have Emily. And I believed him. God. I actually believed him. I quickly locked the phone and placed it back on the counter just as the bathroom door opened. Emily walked out, drying her hair with a towel. She smiled when she saw me. The same smile that made me fall in love with her years ago. "Dinner smells amazing," she said casually. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time, something felt different. Not love, not comfort, just distance. Like I was staring at someone I had never truly known. I wondered how many times she had lied straight to my face. How many times she had kissed me after seeing him. How many times the two of them had laughed about me behind my back. 1,000 questions raced through my head, but I said nothing. Instead, I forced a small smile. "Thanks," I said. We ate dinner like everything was normal. She talked about work. She laughed. At one point, she even reached across the table and held my hand. And the entire time, I sat there wondering how someone could become so good at lying. That night, after she finally fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling for hours because something inside me had changed. I understood something important. If I confronted them now, they would lie. They would deny everything. They would come up with excuses. No, I needed the truth. All of it. So I made a decision. I would pretend nothing was wrong. I would act like I knew absolutely nothing. And I would wait. Because deep in my gut, I had a feeling there was something even worse happening behind my back. Something bigger than an affair. Something darker. And 2 days later, I would discover exactly what it was. A discovery that would destroy every friendship I had left. Jason sounded completely normal. Too normal. "Hey man," he said casually. His voice was relaxed, like we were just two friends having a regular conversation. Like he hadn't been sleeping with my wife for months. "You busy this weekend?" he asked. I leaned back in my chair at work, staring at the ceiling. Inside my chest, my heart was pounding so hard it almost hurt. Just 12 hours earlier, I had discovered the truth about him and Emily. And now he was talking to me like nothing had happened. "Not really," I said slowly. "Why?" There was a short pause on the line. Then Jason said something that made my stomach twist. "I wanted to talk to you about something important." Important. The word echoed inside my head. "Okay," I said carefully. Jason took a deep breath. "So, I'm thinking about proposing." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "Proposing? To who?" But before I could ask, he continued. "To Emily." Everything inside me went silent. My chest tightened. I gripped the phone so hard my fingers started to hurt. Jason laughed awkwardly. "Relax, man. I mean, eventually. Obviously, things would have to change first." Change. That word felt like poison. He was talking about my marriage, like it was just some temporary inconvenience. "You know she's not really happy," he continued. "We've talked about it a lot." "We." The word hit me like a punch. I forced myself to stay calm. "Have you?" I asked. "Yeah," Jason said. "But listen, don't freak out. Nothing has happened yet." The lie was so obvious it almost made me laugh. Images of the hotel photo flashed through my mind, my wife leaning against him, both of them smiling. Nothing has happened yet. Right. Jason lowered his voice slightly. "Look, I didn't want you to hear this from someone else," he said. "I respect you too much for that." Respect. The irony made my jaw tighten. "We care about each other," he continued, "and I think she's going to leave you soon anyway." Leave me. Just like that. Like I was just some small obstacle in their love story. "But that's not even the biggest thing," Jason added, and suddenly his tone changed. Something darker crept into his voice. "There's something else we need to talk about." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked. Jason hesitated for a moment. Then he said something that made the entire situation even more insane. "It's about the wedding." "Wedding?" My mind raced. "What wedding?" I asked slowly. Jason exhaled. "The one we're planning." For a few seconds, I honestly thought my brain had stopped working. Planning. How far had this gone? "You weren't supposed to find out this early," Jason continued, "but Emily and I have already been talking about it." Talking. Planning. Dreaming. While I was still her husband. "Jason?" I said quietly. How long has this been going on?" The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. Then he answered, "About 8 months. 8 months. 8. My vision blurred. 8 months of lies. 8 months of pretending everything was normal. 8 months of my best friend secretly sleeping with my wife. But then Jason said something that made something inside me finally snap. "Look," he continued, "we were hoping you'd handle this like an adult when Emily tells you." "Handle this like an adult?" I almost laughed, but instead I said something calm, something that made him relax immediately. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I understand." Jason sounded relieved. "Good, man. I knew you'd be reasonable." But what he didn't know was that in that exact moment, I had already started planning something. Because if they wanted a wedding, I was going to give them one. A wedding they would never forget, but they had no idea that I planned to be there, and what I was going to reveal during that ceremony would destroy both of their lives in front of everyone they knew. But before I could ruin their wedding, I needed something stronger than anger. I needed proof, real proof. And that night, I finally found it. But the truth hidden inside Emily's laptop was far worse than cheating. That night I waited until Emily fell asleep. She always fell asleep quickly. Within minutes, her breathing became slow and steady. Normally, I found it comforting, but that night it only made me feel colder. I quietly slid out of bed and walked into the living room. The apartment was dark except for the small light coming from the kitchen. Emily's laptop was sitting on the coffee table. For a long moment, I just stood there staring at it. Part of me still hoped I was wrong. Maybe the messages were just flirting. Maybe things hadn't gone as far as I thought. Maybe there was still something left of my marriage to save. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I opened the laptop. It wasn't even locked. Emily had always trusted me. The irony almost made me laugh. I opened her email first. Dozens of normal messages appeared. Work emails, ads, shopping receipts. For a second, I felt stupid. Maybe I was going crazy. But then I saw a folder. A separate email folder with a strange name. Travel plans. That seemed normal enough, until I opened it. Inside were several email confirmations. Hotel bookings, flights, restaurant reservations. But something about them felt wrong, because the dates didn't make sense. Emily had told me she was going on work trips on those exact weekends, trips that suddenly didn't look like work anymore. My chest tightened as I opened one of the hotel confirmations. 2 guests, 1 room, 3 nights. The name listed under the second guest made my stomach twist. Jason Miller, my best friend. The same thing appeared again. Another hotel, another city, another work trip, another booking with Jason. My hands started shaking. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was planned. Carefully planned. Then I noticed something even stranger. A shared document attached to one of the emails. The file name made my heart beat faster. Future plans. I opened it. At first it looked like a simple list, but the more I read, the worse it became. It wasn't just about them being together. It was about my life, my house, my savings, my future. There were notes about Emily filing for divorce, notes about how long it might take, notes about splitting assets, and then one line that made my entire body freeze. After the divorce, we can sell the apartment and move closer to Jason's job. Sell the apartment I had spent years paying for. The apartment that was legally in both our names. They had already planned everything. My chest felt tight. But then I saw something that made everything even darker. At the bottom of the document, there was another section. A section called Wedding Ideas. I stared at the screen in disbelief. There were notes about venues, guest lists, decoration ideas, even possible dates, and the earliest date listed was only 4 months away. 4 months. That meant they weren't just talking about it. They were serious. They were planning a wedding while I was still her husband. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the screen. My mind felt numb. But then, something even worse caught my attention. Another folder. This one was called Important. My stomach dropped. I clicked it. Inside were screenshots of bank accounts. My bank account, my savings, even my retirement fund. Emily had saved everything. Balances, account numbers, transfers, and suddenly something clicked in my mind. This wasn't just about love. This wasn't just about cheating. They had been studying my finances, planning around them, using them. My heart started beating faster again, because now a terrifying question appeared in my mind. Were they planning to leave me, or were they planning to take everything first? I sat there staring at the screen for several minutes. The anger inside me was slowly turning into something colder, something sharper, because now I understood something important. They thought I was the naive husband, the clueless friend, the guy who would quietly disappear when Emily asked for a divorce. They thought I would just accept it, but they were wrong, very wrong, because if they wanted a wedding, I was going to give them one. But not the kind they were expecting, and the more evidence I gathered, the more perfect my plan started to become. But 2 days later, something happened that made everything even more dangerous, because Emily suddenly told me something I never expected, something that meant the timeline was about to move much faster, and when she said it, I realized their wedding was going to happen sooner than anyone thought. 2 days later, Emily came home earlier than usual. The front door opened around 4 in the afternoon. Normally, she didn't get back from work until almost 6. I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch TV, but the moment I heard the door open, my body went tense. Something felt different. Emily walked inside slowly. She looked tired, but also nervous. Not the kind of nervous someone has after a long day at work. The kind of nervous someone has when they're about to change everything. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hey," I replied. She put her bag down near the door and stood there for a moment like she was deciding what to say. Then she walked over and sat next to me on the couch. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear the quiet hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Outside, a car passed by. Normal sounds, normal life, but I could feel something heavy building in the room. Finally, Emily took a deep breath. "There's something I need to talk to you about." There it was, the sentence I had been waiting for. If this had happened a week earlier, my heart probably would have shattered right there, but now, I already knew everything. Still, I forced myself to act confused. "What's wrong?" I asked. Emily looked down at her hands. Her fingers were twisting together nervously. "I've been thinking a lot lately," she said slowly. The words hung in the air. For a moment, the room felt very small. Emily looked up at me carefully, like she was waiting for some big reaction. Anger, shock, pain. But I simply nodded. "Okay," I said quietly. She blinked. Clearly, that wasn't the reaction she expected. I think we've just grown apart," she added quickly. "Things haven't felt the same for a long time." Grown apart, such a simple phrase, such a clean way to hide something ugly. I wondered how many times she had practiced this speech in her head, maybe with Jason, maybe while lying next to me at night. "I don't want to hurt you," she said softly. The words almost made me laugh. Instead, I kept my voice calm. "So what are you saying?" I asked. Emily hesitated. Then she said the words she had clearly planned for weeks. I think maybe we should take some time apart. Time apart. The first step before divorce, before she would finally run to Jason openly. But she still hadn't said his name. Not once. That told me everything. She planned to keep lying until the last possible moment. I've been feeling trapped, she continued, and I think some space might help both of us think clearly. Space. Another safe word, another carefully chosen phrase. I leaned back slightly and looked at her. For the first time in years, I felt nothing. No heartbreak, no panic, just distance. If that's what you need, I said quietly. I understand. Emily's eyes widened slightly. Really? She asked. There was genuine surprise in her voice. She'd expected a fight, crying, questions. Instead, I was giving her calm acceptance, and that confused her. Yeah, I said. If you're unhappy, I don't want to force you to stay. Relief instantly appeared on her face. It was subtle, but I saw it. Like a weight had suddenly lifted off her shoulders. Thank you, she said. I didn't want this to be ugly. Ugly. The word echoed in my mind. If only she knew what ugly really looked like. And then she added something that made my heart start beating faster. I'm actually going to stay with a friend for a few days. A friend? Right. I already knew exactly which friend she meant. Jason. Still, I kept the act going. Who? I asked casually. Emily hesitated for just a second. Then she answered. Sarah? Another lie. Another tiny crack in the story. Okay, I said. That makes sense. Emily stood up and walked toward the bedroom. I'll just pack a small bag, she said. I watched quietly as she disappeared down the hallway. A few minutes later, I heard drawers opening, closet doors sliding, fabric moving. Every sound felt strange, like I was watching the final moments of a life that had already ended. But the truth was, my real plan had already begun, because earlier that same day, I had made a phone call, a very important phone call, to someone who specialized in exposing secrets, someone who knew exactly how to make the truth impossible to hide, and most importantly, someone who owed me a favor. 10 minutes later, Emily came back with a small suitcase. She looked lighter, almost excited, like she was finally free. I'll call you in a few days, she said, so we can talk about everything. The life she and Jason had already planned together. But what she didn't know was that their perfect future already had a deadline, because Jason had unknowingly told me something very important, something that would make my revenge absolutely perfect. Their wedding wasn't just a fantasy anymore. They had already chosen a date. And the moment I opened that file, even I couldn't believe what I was looking at. The apartment felt strangely quiet after Emily left. For 4 years, this place had been our home. There were photos of us on the walls, small decorations she had chosen, books we had bought together. But that night, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage after the actors had walked away. I sat on the couch for a long time, staring at the door she had just closed. Part of me expected her to come back, to say she had made a mistake, to confess everything. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Emily had already chosen her future, and that future didn't include me. Around 9 that evening, my phone buzzed. I looked down at the screen. The name that appeared made my chest tighten. Jason. For a moment, I considered ignoring the call, but then I remembered something important. The more they believed I was clueless, the easier my plan would be. So I answered. Hey, I said. Jason sounded unusually excited. Hey man, he replied. Emily told me you guys talked. Of course she had. That didn't take long. Yeah, I said calmly. How did it go? He asked carefully. I leaned back in the chair. "It was fine," I said. There was a short pause. Then Jason spoke again, his voice slightly more relaxed. "I know this must be hard for you. Hard." That word almost made me laugh. "Yeah," I replied quietly. "I guess things change." Jason exhaled slowly. "I really respect the way you're handling this." Respect, there it was again. The word he kept using while destroying my life. "You deserve someone who makes you happy," he continued. The hypocrisy was almost impressive. Then Jason said something that made my attention sharpen. "Listen, there's something I want to tell you before things become public." Public? My mind immediately focused. "What do you mean?" I asked. Jason hesitated for a moment, then he said it. "Emily and I are going to announce our engagement soon." My stomach twisted slightly, even though I already knew. Hearing it out loud still hurt. "That was fast," I said. "Well, we've actually been planning it for a while," Jason admitted. Of course they had. "But we didn't want things to look bad while you two were still together," he added. How considerate. "So when are you announcing it?" I asked. "Probably next month," he said. Then he added something that made my heart beat faster. "We already booked the venue." "The venue? So it's official?" I asked. "Yeah," Jason said proudly. "The wedding is in 4 months." 4 months, exactly what I'd seen in Emily's document. Then he laughed nervously. "And I know this might sound weird, but I still want you there." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. "You want me at the wedding?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quickly. "I mean, we've been friends forever. It would feel wrong if you weren't there." I stared at the wall in front of me. The audacity was almost unbelievable. He wanted me to watch him marry my wife. But then something inside my mind clicked. A perfect opportunity. "You know what?" I said slowly. "That actually means a lot." Jason sounded relieved. "Really?" "Yeah," I replied. "If Emily's happier with you, then maybe this is how things were supposed to happen." For a few seconds, Jason didn't speak. Then he laughed softly. "I knew you were a good guy." Good guy, right. But what Jason didn't know was that earlier that same day I had received an email. An email containing a file that proved something neither he nor Emily ever expected, because the person I'd contacted 2 days earlier had done exactly what I asked. He had looked deeper, much deeper. And what he found wasn't just proof of cheating. It was proof of something far worse. Something illegal. Something that could completely destroy their future together. After the call ended, I opened my laptop and clicked the file again. My eyes moved slowly across the screen. Bank transfers, hidden accounts, payments that didn't make sense. And then one document that made everything clear. A document showing that Jason and Emily hadn't just been planning a wedding. They had been secretly moving my money, my savings, my retirement fund, little by little, carefully, quietly, for months. My hands slowly formed into fists. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. They weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to take everything I had first. But the worst part? They thought they had already succeeded. And that's when I realized something. Their wedding wasn't just going to be ruined. It was going to become the moment their entire world collapsed. But what happened 2 weeks later made my revenge even more perfect than I ever imagined. Because Jason sent me something I never expected, an official invitation to their wedding. And the message written inside it gave me the perfect idea. 2 weeks later, the official wedding invitation arrived. I almost laughed when I saw the envelope. It was elegant, thick white paper with gold lettering, the kind of invitation people send when they want their wedding to look perfect. For a moment, I just stared at it sitting on my kitchen table. My name was written on the front in neat handwriting. Jason had personally addressed it, almost like he was proud of inviting me. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a beautifully printed card. Jason Miller and Emily Carter invite you to celebrate their wedding. The date, the venue, everything was there, 4 months from now, exactly like Jason had said. But what caught my attention the most was the small message Jason had written at the bottom. Hope you'll come. It wouldn't feel right without you there. I leaned back in my chair. The confidence was unbelievable. They really believed I had accepted everything. They thought I was the quiet, understanding ex-husband, the guy who would smile politely and disappear from their lives. But the truth was, the moment I read that invitation, my plan became even better. Because if they wanted me at their wedding, I was definitely going to be there, just not in the way they expected. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was Emily, the first message she had sent me in over a week. Did you get the invitation? I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. Yes. 3 dots appeared immediately. I know this is awkward, she wrote, but Jason really wanted you there. Jason really wanted me there. The irony was almost painful. I'll think about it, I replied. She sent a heart emoji. A heart. After everything. I closed the chat without answering. Then I opened the folder on my laptop again. The evidence, every transfer, every secret account, every message about moving my money. My investigator had done incredible work. Bank statements, IP logs, screenshots of conversations between Jason and Emily. They had been planning everything for months. Jason even wrote one message that made my blood boil. Once we get his savings transferred, we'll be safe. Safe. Like I was just some obstacle to eliminate. But now the situation had changed. Because the investigator had also discovered something even worse. Something Jason definitely didn't want anyone to know. A hidden investment account. Money that didn't belong to him. Money connected to his company. And the way he had moved it was dangerously close to fraud. I sat there staring at the documents. Suddenly I realized something important. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was a bomb that could destroy Jason's career, reputation, and maybe even his freedom. And the most perfect place to drop that bomb? Their wedding, in front of everyone, friends, family, co-workers, everyone who believed their love story was real. But the best part? They would help me do it. Because 2 days later, Jason called again. And what he asked me next made my plan even more perfect. Hey man, he said nervously. I wanted to ask you something. What? I replied. There was a short pause. Then Jason said the words that made me smile slowly. Would you be willing to give a speech at the wedding? For a moment, I didn't answer. A speech at their wedding, in front of everyone. Jason quickly continued. I think it would mean a lot to Emily. You know, showing there's no bad blood. No bad blood. I almost laughed, but instead I said something calm. Something that made Jason relax instantly. Yeah, I said. I'd be happy to. Jason sounded relieved. Really? That's great, man. But what he didn't know was that the moment I hung up the phone, I started writing that speech. And by the time I finished it, their wedding day was going to become the worst day of their lives. But something unexpected happened 1 month later. Something that almost ruined my entire plan, because the night before the wedding, Emily showed up at my door, and the first thing she said made my heart stop. Jason doesn't know this, but we need to talk.